Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, in my continuing investigation into satanic organizations and groups, and my latest getting back into this research and running into Son of Sam information, which has been directly linked to by Berkowitz, who has admitted killing several people, that this was a satanic organization. As Maurice Terry has stated in his book, The Ultimate Evil, that there is some sort of satanic gang that has been connected to this and so many others. And this seems to stretch across the world, and particularly the United States, as they've tied these satanic groups into Manson and those murders and the Process Church. It's quite an interesting story. And I was recently going through all the old videos from Geraldo Rivera, etc. And this is quite frightening stories from people who have been victimized. Women have been used as breeders and were forced to skin alive and murder their babies. And the huge amount of information that came out then that has been swept under the carpet. And now everything is turned into the Satanism, Luciferianism of the New Age. And this is something that is just an alternative religion. Well, this is really appalling. I mean, the types of things that these kind of people do is frightening. And when you get people into this industry that know nothing about it and openly state that, and then they go to know nothing. So how can you, as a person who know nothing, choose a proper expert? And are you doing research past that? Well, the bottom line is that you can't. And one of the people out there who's shooting his mouth off, who has absolutely no background whatsoever, is a guy called Manny Grossman. Now, we've looked up old Manny Grossman because I wanted to find out, what's his background. Well, I originally kind of supported him and even tried to help him a wee bit, but he didn't want to find out any real information. He didn't want to delve into anything. He wants people to give him a bunch of free stuff so he can go make money off of it, which is what he's actually doing. So we have to understand where this guy is coming from. Who is he involved with? And while it's fun to go to the old neighborhoods, and I guess that's his own little way of doing something different, and he lives in those neighborhoods. And we'll get into his background here as well, from his education and everything else. So he's apparently half Puerto Rican, half Jewish. He grew up in Riverdale. Am I saying that right? Riverdale, I believe. I guess that's part of the Bronx. There's Riverdale, Yonkers, Queens, all that stuff. It's kind of this confusing community or suburbs of New York City that have private houses, etc. And they're all kind of connected, but they're all kind of separate. But it's really not important. So this is the area that David Berkowitz was active in. Not necessarily Riverdale, but all these different communities. There were activities of satanic, large, wealthy groups. Riverdale is an upper middle class neighborhood. Yonkers is as well. So these are apparently where rich people lived and the rich connections that go to all this. And it's a complicated case, and it's also a very serious case. People have been murdered here. The horrible things that have happened in Satanism is something that you have to seek out people who know what they're talking about. Someone like me, who's researched it for 50 years, who was nice enough to push him in a couple of directions, which he ignored. And when he was told this by one of his, which I think is him, or a plant of him that I allege, who goes by the Silvo R on YouTube, because the minute I left this comment, he asked me about Manny. I go, that's an indirect way of getting publicity on my videos for him. The minute I answered him and said, he's not a very good researcher. I've contacted him. He doesn't want good information, etc. I heard back from Manny on this exact thing within minutes. I then, since I heard back from Manny, I then contacted him through his YouTube channel saying, hey, let's talk about this as professionals and see what we can do. He said, lose my number, dude. I'm done with this. That's a real researcher for you, but that's very typical of Manny and his attitude. He comes off very arrogant to me, and I wonder his intentions. And after doing some research on him, there's a lot of questions of who this guy is and what he's involved in. Well, he certainly seems to be kind of a very arrogant person who isn't open to anybody unless you're some sort of other goofball, and he's also connected with some very strange people. Now, he has talked to a lot of the victims, the people involved in this case in the back, trying to help promote their books, but he's filling his pockets. He has taken all his information and put it on a pay-for-view type service, and certainly I understand that. He apparently has to make money, which he can no longer do because of his bizarre political belief systems. But let's get back to who he is and his background. Well, I can't find any information on him of going to a college. What he is a gardener. And he's been doing this for many years now. I believe he incorporated his gardening service, because it states here on the net, and everything I'm giving you right now is on the net. I'm not making up anything. If anything on the net here is incorrect and you want to correct it, well, leave it in the comments. I'm more than happy to do it. I'm a real researcher. I'm also not a little baby who's easily offended by anything that's stated, even when, especially when the truth is stated. So if there's something that's incorrect here, let me know. But this is all on the net. I'm not making up anything. As I always do, I go to third-party sources, and I'm a reporter. I report the facts. That's what's up there. If it's wrong, let me know, and we can correct it. But I'm not sure that we have to correct the fact that he's the owner. Apparently, he incorporated Rogers Gardening Service, which is kind of odd. Why is it named Rogers? His name is Grossman, Manny Grossman. I don't understand that either. It's kind of bizarre. But here's what it says about that company, which apparently was incorporated in 2009. And he must be in his early 30s or middle 30s. It's hard to say. Again, is that important? But we give you a ballpark there. It says Manny Grossman is the owner of Rogers Gardening Service, a garden maintenance, design, installation, and restoration firm located in New York City that specializes in luxury co-ops in Manhattan and Riverdale. You know, those are the rich areas. He is certified in ornamental horticulture by NYBG. Manny's also a permaculture designer and owns a farm in Puerto Rico that grows exotic tropical fruits and nuts. His emphasis is on simple, effective, all-natural, organic gardening. Well, that sounds great. And, of course, that usually puts people into a very caring for the soil and earth attitude, which usually means that these people tend to be more liberal based. Well, not really. Not when it comes to him. So I can also see why he's having so many conflicts. Apparently, he's also connected to other people in this company. Now, it says that he's the owner of that company. I don't know if these other people have stock interests. It is an LLC, which stock is in a person called Nick Stores, urban farmer manager, and I'm not going to read all his stuff. He got a BA from McGill University. Now, this is not Manny. This is Nick Stores. Let's make sure we understand, because Manny has no education that I'm aware of. I couldn't find anything on LinkedIn on him stating education, or anything for that matter, and he doesn't state that. I'm assuming he would. So he was... he worked in Brazil and Bolivia, growing vegetables and coffee. Then he worked for other companies. He moved to New York City and worked as a gardener for Central Park Conservatory, obtained a certification in horticulture from the New York Botanical Gardens, which I think is that's the same place that Manny got it from. I'm assuming that's where they met. Which is very interesting. He's connected here. And, of course, he's also connected with a Renee Marsh. Renee Marsh is a garden designer, advanced master gardener, horticulture farmer, a flower farmer. She's the owner of a Simple Place and Hilltop Blooms, garden design and cut flower business, respectively. So I'm not sure how they all tie together there. She apparently was educated at the same place. All these people seem to be educated at the same place and getting their degrees from the New York City Botanical Gardens, which apparently certify people, have courses and everything else. And he's taught courses there as well as part of what he did. Now, he has a strange background. He likes to rant about all sorts of conspiracy theories. He likes to call people lefties. He thinks he's living, from what I can tell, he's mimicking the rock group that he loves so much, Rush. He wears these 1980 looking, he's got a fake wig on with hair to look like the bass player. He's got his guitar behind him. So he kind of likes this fantasy of living in this rock band Rush reality. Dresses like them, even looks a little like their bass guitar player. And of course, he has that bass guitar player behind him in many of his actual videos. And coming from an upper middle class family, he caters to rich people in Manhattan, his business, as it states there, and Riverdale, which again, doing maintenance there, and other places. I'm not sure what other things he actually has done there. And that's where he built his business from, and I'm not sure how successful or not it was. Apparently, he was doing fairly well with it. Working for all the rich people, which is kind of interesting because these are the kind of people that were connected to these possible satanic group activities, were connected to these high-level wealthy people. But he likes to use that term. He doesn't like, he thinks that coverts is a big joke and it's been contrived, and he doesn't believe in wearing masks or distancing himself. So he doesn't want to follow through as a public person going out and maintaining properties, what is considered the proper thing to do in society. Now we can get into the meanings of all this or not, but it's disconsiderate and rude, which seems to be part of his personality, to not wear masks and to not have some distancing. Now, obviously, you're going to pass disease through your spit, through your breath, if you're not using a mask. That's why surgeons use masks. There is nothing to debate about that. It's a fact. Now, there are millions of people that have died of, hundreds of thousands of people have died from COVID. Whether it is real or not in terms of who created it is not the point. I just talked to a friend of mine I've known for years, and he just knew somebody personally who just died from COVID. And so many other people do. So the bottom line is, whether this is not, we have to respect each other, and I don't want anybody coming up to me and breathing on me that's not wearing a mask. I don't want somebody standing close to me. Now, these are all transmissions and way things are done much easier. The difference between having a mask on is the difference between breathing on somebody and spitting on somebody. But he can't figure that out either. So the problem with all this is where is this and how is this guy thinking? It's just common courtesy to do these things properly. So he claims because of this, and I think there's a lot of other issues here, which I'm not going to bother to find out about. I mean, this guy isn't that important. But, know your sources. I've talked about this. If you're getting information from people, who are they? What is their background? Who are they working with? So this guy doesn't understand how to take information in. So he likes to call everybody lefties. He apparently at one time was a big Donald Trump supporter. He's one of those kind of goofballs. Again, did you do your research there, Manny? Everybody knows that Donald Trump is a scumbag who's never done anything. Now, we all like the fact that he's supposed to be outside of the system, even though he is a Republican doing Republican policies. That he doesn't do anything. He's in bed with criminals. He's been connected to all sorts of sexual abuse situations. He has cases of people against him. 10, 15 people that are filing sexual harassment charges about him. I mean, these are all the things that go on. He's been linked to and allegedly involved with Epstein and him bringing over all these kind of Russian girls that he's so into. So, I mean, this goes on, and he's been able to escape for a period of time. But, if you're a researcher, you look into it. I like Donald Trump initially, because he was kind of an outsider. And I like what he talks about. Well, let's rebuild America. He didn't do anything. He didn't open any new factories. They haven't done anything. They haven't brought in any business. What he's done is opened up public lands to oil companies and other people who have raped it to get natural resources out of it. He hasn't done anything. And I'm sure I allege there's all sorts of kickbacks from that. He certainly has not taken care of and doesn't have the courage to take care of the Mexican border. He should basically go in there and clean that up. I mean, this is an attack on our country, but he doesn't want to do that because he doesn't have the courage to do it. But he likes to talk about it. And, building walls is such an imbecilic way of doing things and so costly. The bottom line is that this is a terrorist attack on the United States. The Mexican government are controlled by criminals. Of course, so is he. He's linked to all the Russian mafias, and of course, that's who runs New York City, and of course, that's who he kowtows to. I even saw him on Letterman kowtowing to them, saying how the organized crime were such nice guys. So the whole idea is that this is the kind of thing you get. But you didn't see that, did you, Manny? You didn't do your research, did you, Manny? And some lefties. And what does that mean for a natural organic gardener, which apparently he doesn't think are, again, because, the Republicans don't give a damn about organics. They want to spray lots more chemicals to make DuPont richer. So he seems to be a very confused individual. So he has no background. He's not a researcher. He's a gardener. Whether he's a good gardener or bad gardener, I'm not sure what that means or even if it has value. He's a gardener. He has no formal education. He's never done anything in this field. He has taught courses in gardening, and he has kept up some buildings. Now, that doesn't mean he has anything other than the fact that apparently he knows how to garden. If he knew how to garden, maybe he would have business now, which he doesn't. Now, he claims that all the lefties fired him because of the fact of his not wearing masks. So he would not wear a mask. He would come right up and talk in your face, apparently. And people didn't like that. So the whole idea is, hey, that's how the world is. You got to respect other people, something that you should have learned when I was nice enough to contact you and try and give you information showing that you had wrong information. And I've caught him with so much disinformation that I'm now alleging that he is a disinformation agent. He could possibly and allegedly could be working for all the rich people to cover up all their crimes done in this case. He also seems to be connected, which he ignores, and I allegedly wonder if he is not involved in satanic practices himself. He's involved with the rock group Rush, and initially I thought, they don't look too satanic. I listened to a couple of their songs. Well, I did some further research. Maybe you should, Manny. And the fact is that the Rush group has been using all sorts of occult symbology on their records, including one record that they labeled. The title of the record was 2112. Now, this was put out in the 80s, late 70s. Again, all this is, I'm not going to spend time with dates, but the point is it certainly was not put out in 2112. There is no 2112 yet. We're in 20. So why would you title that? Well, I'll tell you what that adds up to in numerology. And of course, this is all part of the game they play. It adds up to 6. Underneath that was a flaming star. Now, a pentagram. Now, the point is the pentagram was not upside down, but a circled flaming pentagram is an occult symbol. So it has been stated by some people that the reason that it was not put upside down, inverse, was a printing error. Well, that's interesting as well. But just putting that on there, putting a circle around a star and having it flaming certainly says something. Well, why would you do that? Why would you name your album such and then put a flaming pentagram on the front of it? And then there's more on that album. There is a naked man standing in front of the circled pentagram as well. And it has been stated by several people that if you look at the artwork on the back, which I have done, of this naked man facing the pentagram, that there appears to be some sort of devil face in there. Now, it's hard to say with this stuff, but this isn't normal cover stuff. So, of course, the band Rush and the spokesman for them, and I don't know if he's the lead singer or whoever he is, has stated that this is not the case at all. But of course, they all state that. They're not overtly giving satanic messages. Several of their songs have some strange lyrics in it that allude to occultism and sadism. And also, they had another album that has the giant owl on it. Now, owls have become symbols of Satanism at this point. It's the owls, particularly in the Bohemian Grove rituals and the Illuminati, etc. All the stuff that he's so into with all the conspiracy things, that he's heavily involved in a group mimicking them. He's wearing a false wig to look like them. All this stuff, he cuts his t-shirts off at the shoulders. Typical, this 80s type rock band look. So, this isn't just somebody who's appreciating their music. He's imitating them. This is his heroes. He didn't notice any of this stuff. He doesn't know anything about occult symbol. Of course he doesn't. So he's mimicking a group that is allegedly connected to Satanism and has some strange occult artwork on their albums. Now, I'm not going to go through all this stuff and do it. I looked at what was on the web, and of course I know what's real and not here. But, you don't use owls normally. If you do use owls the way they're doing it, they have very negative satanic occult meanings. As does pentagrams that are on fire and circled, and the other things that this band Rush has done. So, yet here again, how ignorant can you get? Now, if you like them, if you don't believe all that stuff because you don't want to do your proper research, these are things that have to be questioned. But here we go again. The guy can't make any proper judgments. So, this is what this guy's into. So, what is this connection? And he's connected with a lot of the people who apparently were the wealthy people that were involved in running these satanic cults. So I don't know about being involved with, but he certainly is going after that clientele. So we don't know anything. I have no idea what his contact level is. But again, all this stuff stinks for a guy who's into conspiracy theories, who thinks everybody is cheating him, that coverts and everything else is set up. Well, he's certainly not looking in his own living room. So that's something that should be questioned. He doesn't think that Rush in any way is satanic. Well, I didn't think so initially either. Look into it, but he won't look into anything. He's not a researcher. He's a gardener. Throughout all his little tours around the neighborhoods, he makes sure he points out plants and other things and uses his pseudo-intellectual reality to say, yeah, it's a bougainvillea, and he put it here. Then he says, well, look at this. This isn't a balanced area. So what he's doing is trying to sell his gardening service and doing the process here. I'm not sure there's anything wrong with that, but it kind of doesn't fit talking about the son of Sam and then giving a landscaping tutorial. So I don't know how that fits into what he's doing, but he's trying to hawk business. And of course, this whole thing with him is making money. He's taken these, since he's found some success with his videos, he's taking this to private, and he has a fair amount of people paying him every month to see his exclusive content. So, but they are getting misled. So he is a disinformation agent, I allege. The bottom line is he's really putting out a lot of garbage. He's not finding any facts. The people he interviews that were involved in this are interesting, and they give their side of the story. And of course, he makes money off of them with the fact of mentioning their book, which I guess helps them. I guess people sell books when they see that. But, that's the part of it. He is a businessman, and he's trying to milk every penny he can get out of everything. So, and that's what his whole thing is about. The fact that he's also connected to an allegedly satanic group that certainly fits the reality of using symbols that are very questionable. There were also some backward masking that was found by another investigator for one of their main songs. So, now, I don't know how much credit you give to backward masking or not. It is kind of fascinating how these things sound like this. And you have to wonder that is this just something that happens after you have enough songs that, some of these will. But, it is very interesting with backward masting that here we get satanic messages off of at least one song from Rush. Now, all this is on the net as well. Check it out. No, I'm not making up any of this. So what do we look? Here's a guy doing investigations on satanic cults. He's hooked up and worships almost, at least it appears to me. He's totally gaga about Rush and imitates them, wants to look like them, has a false wig so he can look like these 70, 80 rockers, has a guitar sitting there. So he's really into these people, yet he doesn't recognize some of these problems. So, it's something to look into and to be, what kind of an investigator are you? You haven't looked into any of that. And anytime he's questioned about that, well, I'm not an expert. That's right. You're not an expert on anything. You're not even a reporter. The problem is that you have to have knowledge of something to report things. So the plain and simple fact is he's giving out bad information. Now, is this being done deliberate? I don't know. Is this guy really some closet Satanist? Well, I don't know. But it certainly could be, all of these things could certainly be alleged about him that, we have to look at this. This guy is also hooked up with some other lunatic fringe. This Dr. Hatamoto, who is an apologist for the atrocities of the Japanese, and an apologist for the Nazis, who was locked out of UC Berkeley as a professor. They packed his stuff up, put his bags in front of the door, boxes in front of the door, and locked him out of his office. He's a very bizarre person himself, who's clearly stated that his father was a Yakuza, and that he loved the Yakuza, and the Yakuza were great people, and he highly supports them. This is a very bizarre guy, and he's hooked up with him as well, and this guy is really over the top, and he claims to be a professor, but he's done a lot of bad research himself, talking about how wonderful Late Night was with Johnny Carson, and it's really hard to figure out what he's saying, but Johnny Carson was pretty much of a nasty guy, and everybody has reported that. Now, he had a great show. Everybody used to watch it back then, and there wasn't the internet to report things, but his wives used to run out of his house over to Truman Capote's house, and Truman Capote would bring them in and protect them, and Johnny would come over and bang on the door screaming at him. And this was talked about by Truman Capote. But of course, this great researcher from UC Davis never got any of this. He also thinks that everybody is basically an asset of the CIA. And when I told him about Art Bell was definitely an asset, and of course they started his show and funded it. And this is all covered in the book Sears that is out there, and it shows the exact way that show was set up and who was involved. A very fascinating, important book if you want to learn about Art Bell and that entire show that he ran. When I pointed that out to him, he got back and was nasty again. Don't you understand what I was saying? Art Bell was involved in all sorts of things. He was definitely an asset, and this has been confirmed, again, not by me, by others. So, here's another rude, obnoxious person who was thrown out of universities, locked out. They got rid of him as soon as he can because of his very bizarre views. So if you go to his channel, you find all his bizarre, he claims he's such a great researcher. Well, I don't see any of that. There's nothing on there. Anytime I know about a subject quite deeply, like Art Bell or even Johnny Carson, you get nothing but misstatements from people like him. So certainly there is no great research going on there because there's lots of data that say the opposite. So there's all sorts of problems like that. So he's hooked up with this guy who's a very strange, off-the-wall, nasty. They kind of have the same type of personalities. They seem to be very nasty people. And when you want to give somebody information, if they're a true researcher, they will grab that and they'll find out what the true story is. That's what I do all the time. If somebody leaves me a comment, I try and take it at face value and see what's happening. Now, there's also been a lot of allegations against Grossman as well, Manny, that has been alleged to me. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but it certainly is. Manny Grossman got most of his information from Ed Opperman, who has his own channel. This guy is a professional, licensed private investigator in the state of New York, who's done a lot of information, a lot of shows on, a lot of research on the Son of Sam. So basically, this is where he got his foundation from, so it is claimed. So I wouldn't be surprised. Certainly, there are hours and hours of information. So you want good information on this case and what was happening with it, or even other issues, well, go to Ed Opperman. He is a licensed private detective, been involved with people. He seems to be very professional, and he is he's an official researcher. That's what private detectives do. They do research. So this is a place to get good information from. You can also get information from the horse's mouth. Maurice Terry has several videos on actual YouTube where he was interviewed. So if you want to get the information direct from the person who really did research, well, go direct. Trying to get through some gardener who's trying to make money on things, who's just parading around people that were involved in this, who want their 15 minutes of fame, is not the place for serious information. And this is a serious topic. People have been murdered. It continues. There's a long history of human sacrifice and torture of children. This is not a game, Manny. So the whole idea is that he thinks it is to fill his pockets, and that's all he's doing. So there's that, and of course there are other people that were involved with it. One of the people that was involved in the Son of Sam shootings, who's still alive, I think he's the only guy that survived, well, he's written a book and done his investigations. Read his stuff. This is right from the horse's mouth. And as I mentioned, Maury Terry has this. Not only that, Maury Terry turned over all of his new book documents, where he was going to name names, over to another individual. Now, I'm going to talk about him in the future as well. Now, what's happened to the new book, what happened to all this information is kind of interesting. We'll have to find out, where is it? Maybe with the new information or the new interest in this area, he'll publish it. But, this is a long time ago. There's really not too many people interested in this. I believe that Manny has a following of people that are in that area who are kind of curious what happened where they live. That's my guess. So he puts on a lot of people with disinformation. I contacted him and said, hey, check out Dr. Grande. He did a whole little investigation into David Berkowitz and his mental condition. He's a licensed psychologist. He has a PhD. I'm assuming, and of course this is, again, assuming, I don't know where Dr. Grande got his information from, but we're assuming it's a pretty valid source. He does this on a whole bunch of people. He talks about them. He does his research on them. So he should be some way be able to access information. Now, he talked about the horrible things that Berkowitz did in his childhood and everything else. It's a long list of stuff. Very important information to have. Very important information to know how to question people with. But this was totally ignored. To further go, and he talked with some police officer who knew Davy Berkowitz around his high school age. But this detective didn't go to the same high school. He went to a high school out of the area. So he wasn't going to school with Berkowitz. Apparently, they were together for long periods of time after school, hunting down and chasing fire engines and police cars. Apparently, that's what these people did. To an extreme of actually getting police cars so they could infiltrate in with the police, which sounds to me to be dangerous and should be illegal. Apparently, this was a common practice back then in the 70s, which is fairly spooky. But this is where Berkowitz was learning how the police operated and how to follow them on scanners, because they had their own scanners following the police departments with all of this stuff. So, but of course, like everybody does to every maniac, he was the nicest guy you could ever know. This is from a police detective of 30 years. Well, I think that says a lot for itself. But So he was the nicest guy. Nobody figured it. Matter of fact, when he was notified that Berkowitz was arrested for and confessed to these murders, and they talked to a friend called him and said, guess what? One of your friends was just arrested. And he was the last one that this detective mentioned. That's how these people are. You don't function as a crazy lunatic by walking around drooling on yourself saying, who can I kill? Who can I kill? Hey, you got a gun? I want to kill. No, you don't do that. They hide. And as per Dr. Grande, without going into personal research, and I contacted him without a response either. You know, people don't want to respond. He just wants to collect money and have you subscribe to his channel. Same old story. They don't want to really respond to where he got this information from. But Berkowitz had numerous head injuries. He saw death on 2 or 3 occasions. He had all sorts of problems. He was lighting fires and torturing animals, and all these things killed the parakeet of one of the people he was living with. All the stuff that went on that proved that this guy's pretty unhinged. Now, coming from his buddy, who knew him in middle of high school, he was a perfect guy. He did absolutely nothing. And what happened is when he went into the military, he snapped. And he has got letters from him stating this and that how enraged he was because the North Koreans were able to shoot at the South Koreans without having to, they could do nothing about it, which is, I'm sure that's true. And this unhinged him. He started taking drugs. He started a fire there, and eventually was kicked out of the military in one fashion or another. So that's exactly what the story was there to do. But, you know, these are critical areas. These are things that have to be looked into if you want to get the true story here. I'm not really interested in Berkowitz. I'm not interested in what happened to him. It's just that these are facts that we should know about if you're a so-called researcher of this and want to get to the details of it. Well, the bottom line is that was never expressed. So that was put out there as fact because there was no research done. He didn't listen to this actual research and statements done by a PhD psychologist that should be taken into consideration when you're looking at the mental state of someone, not somebody that spent a few hours a day with him after school. So that's not good enough, and we know it's not good enough because of the outcomes of this. So all of this is very important and shows that this is not a person who knows anything about research and doesn't want to follow up. He doesn't follow up. You know, this is a case that is heavily involved in occult symbolism and other things. He knows absolutely nothing about it, and he claims to have some sort of expert. I haven't seen who that guy is. I've seen his picture and some comments, but when he looked at this so-called occult symbol expert, he looked at a symbol and didn't know what it meant. And it was quite obvious what it meant. And so he's not a very good authority on any of that from what I can see. I don't know what his background is or not, but certainly that didn't help him. But you as a person involved in this should have knowledge of this. Well, he doesn't want to do anything. He wants people to hand him information so that he can take that information and make money off of it. It's just as simple as that. There's really not anything to it. The problem with that is that you don't have any way of filtering what is good and what's not. So that's where everybody is left. So he's trying to milk everybody. He gets anybody connected with it so that he can make a show and then charge for it. Well, I'm not sure there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But if you don't have any credibility, if you're nothing more than a gardener who doesn't have any background in research, who doesn't know anything about guns, Satanism, or anything else, well, I mean, you're just going to be a really bad reporter. And you're going to let people slide. Now, if you would have had the report from Dr. Grande when you were talking to this other guy, you could have went through this so that we could clarify that. Now, what is the truth here? But again, it doesn't really matter. The proof of the pudding is that David Berkowitz was convicted of and admitted to killing people. So it's not the fact of whether this guy is innocent or not. The fact is that he played everybody he knew, apparently. He was a punk in school. He beat up people because he was teased about he being overweight. All this stuff is contributing to him, but never mentioned by this great investigating detective guy who absolutely knew nothing about it. So, and why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't you even look into that? I mean, aren't you a little curious the fact of this guy you knew for so many years that all of a sudden came out as a person who murdered a bunch of people? And then, of course, we have the bigger picture here with the whole satanic cults. And, I highly recommend that people go on YouTube and look into satanic cults and so forth, and look at the Geraldo Rivera special on this, where they interviewed so many women who were used as breeders and who had to murder their children. Now, the bottom line is that, and of course, Michael Aquino was there, and so was Anton LaVey's daughter, talking about this, and their response was, of course, and I don't believe that those two groups are involved directly in that. Of course, Aquino has been linked to some child molestation cases, and we don't know what really happened there. He's been allegedly, and the military stated they had plenty of evidence against him, but didn't want to take the case further, making it into a circus. But that's what the U.S. military said. Now, Aquino has always denied all this, and again, who knows? But there's been some, if you look at the evidence there, there's some pretty odd stuff going on there of children from the Aquino situation there in the military base, who took investigators to the secret entrance where he entered his house, because he didn't enter his house directly because he was afraid of attacks. Now, in general, the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set are not recommending or in any way stating these kind of practices or what they do. Now, they tend to be much more philosophical, but it's a dirty philosophy. And this easily spills over into all these other things if you can get away with it. The Church of Satan was a big failure. Anton LaVey basically died in poverty. Excuse me. And the whole Church of Satan really didn't have much of a big run. They had kind of a fun explosion during this time when there was drugs and sex were everywhere, and this catered to people. And but he never really made much money. He tried to make money from the Church of Satan, and this is what caused the big problems with Aquino. And Aquino goes into an entire book on them. But it's unlikely. Of course, we don't know. Bottom line is that there's some pretty strong evidence that Michael Aquino was involved with some child molestation. The records on the Presidio military base, on the children and everything else, follow the fires, people. Burnt down. So the whole idea is that, those records were lost. Now, what they're doing and what they're up to, who knows? But these are slick people. They're not going to be easily caught. These underground of deadly murderers who are involved in these things, who are possessed by the Wendigo energies, are real, and there are numerous. They are legion. It has now become part of mainstream belief systems, brought in by heavy metal rockers and all this stuff, just saying, well, we're just anti the establishment. But the problem is being anti-establishment to the point of being into evil practices is quite a difference. Now, you need to know all this stuff, and it's not that much work. If old Manny would sit down and watch, 10, 20 hours of videos and figure out and see what was going on there, maybe he could. And if he sought out people, since he's been listening to my videos for quite some time now, if he would have sought me out as an advisor to at least ask questions of me, he would do better than this person who apparently is fairly uneducated in occultism in general that he's working with. Of course, he's working with some other good people, and as he said, the victims, and he talks to people, and it's kind of fast, but they don't know anything. They go and say, well, yeah, I heard this here back then. There was talk about that, and you never won an Untermeyer Park. It's all nonsense. Then he goes and tries to think that police are going to tell him and give him intimate records. It's ridiculous. This is a dangerous area, and the police are not going to give old Manny here, basically a nobody, anything. So he's got on one guy that he got on there to talk about the general. Not really much about the case, but what was going on there, and he has his own little book that he promoted. And again, it's kind of interesting, but it really had nothing to do with it. Apparently, New York City and all of these accompanying areas, particularly back in those times, were really a piss hole. Horrible criminals activity was going on, and the police were impotent and corrupt. The mafia was running most of everything in New York City. All these things seem to. So in terms of society from the 1970s and 80s compared to today, there seems to be less direct corruption, but there certainly is all this still going on, as we know, with the Russians running everything and Trump involved with them and having to pay everybody off. And that's how things went, and it still goes everywhere. To build housing in Queens and everything else, which is what Trump's father did, well, you had to be in with certain people and they had to be paid off. That's the way it works. Unfortunately, that means everybody is corrupt. I know these are all the things that you have to look into. So, the bottom line is that this guy is a gardener. He is indirectly or directly becoming a misinformation agent because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's talking to people that give him stories, and he is presenting this as fact and doesn't want to follow up on it. He wants somebody else to do the work for him. He just wants to run around with a camera stating whatever he states. And if I see another video of Untermeyer Park, I think I'll vomit. Enough's enough there. He then goes and looks at occult symbolism in Untermeyer Park in one of their areas there. I forget particularly what they called it, and he doesn't understand what it means, and his expert doesn't know what it means either. So the whole idea is that this could be an important clue, but there's bigger things going on here. And the people that have all this information is another person who was given all the research that Maurice Terry was going to publish before his death, who has all this information. He's the guy, and that's the book we need to get to. Go over and over the same thing, to talk to people. Yeah, I lived near the park. I saw things. Well, I don't know how interesting that is. This is 30 years ago. I mean, there's a bigger issue here, and a terrible issue of Satanism and everything else that is taken over this country in a large way, and has been obviously going on at a very dangerous and deep level for many, many years. And to treat it this poorly is really, and to treat it so badly by this gardener, who isn't really seeking any types of decent information, who's hooked up with some strange, bizarre people, is a big question that he calls friends. Now, as I said, he has a few good people he has on there who are trying to get the information out. I'm assuming they're promoting their own products to go on there. But, why they would want to feed this guy, I have no idea. But the point is that he is heavily involved in and follows a rock band who has strong satanic images in their music and their albums, and these are featured online again. Check it out for yourself. He's also hooked up with disinformation he keeps getting everywhere. The fact that one person's opinion of what someone was like in high school when he wasn't even going to the same high school is an interesting perception. It just shows you how tricky all this is. So we need to, and while the information was interesting, getting information on some of his military service and other things, well, you have to put the pieces together. Well, this is what happened in the military. Well, that was good, informative, but you have to put that together with Dr. Grande's stuff. This is what a researcher does. And figure out, well, how does this make any sense? And you have to contact Dr. Grande further and find out, well, where did this information come from that you are reporting? And try and verify that. But he's not going to do any of that. He has somebody else do that for him. They do it for free. He makes money off of it. Then he reports it, and that's what he does. And then he's trying to hawk more and more gardening jobs. Because, how long can he do this? How long can he keep putting out the same information over and over again? There's nothing new here. The real information you can get directly from Maurice Terry himself on YouTube, who did several interviews. They're all up there. You can go to a great researcher and a professional researcher, Ed Opperman. Again, he's on YouTube. Punch in his name and you'll find that. There's also some talk that was alleged to me that Manny was harassing Ed Opperman, trying to get him to work with him because he wanted to do that. He wants to go in there and get information and work with other people so he can get their viewers and then bring them over to his paid spot. So you have to be very careful with people like that want to steal your audience without any benefit to you. So that was alleged to me. I have no idea if that's not. But it seems to me there's an awful lot of shadows on old Mr. Grossman here. The fact that he has these areas, these problems, these alleged incidents that are going against him. Well, the bottom line is that he's not a researcher. He has no idea. If you listen to him, it's all, I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm not that. Well, what? You're supposed to be researching this. You have to put the pieces together. Then he goes to other people. Well, if you're going to give credit to other people, well, who are they and what they know? We already have told you that his occult expert overlooked a massive mistake on the actual area of occult symbolism. How many other ones? Then we get strange information from a person who knew Berkowitz in high school, which doesn't fit with his profile. And, we can pretty much rule out anything that guy said, because in the end, Berkowitz murdered a whole bunch of people and admitted that he was involved in a larger group. So what does all that mean? So all this is a bunch of disinformation. Now, is this being done deliberately? Is this about the confusion factor? Is this deliberate disinformation from this righty, this kind of goofball who apparently agrees with his other professor buddy who thinks the Nazis are wonderful, the Yakuza are wonderful, and then, of course, Japan never committed any crimes. They only killed 30 million Chinese civilians. The kind of horrendous atrocities that the Japanese have committed is a matter of record. And there is a Pacific Atrocities Foundation where you can get all this information from that has been kind of kept from everybody while they have focused on European one. You've got to remember that the Japanese have been murdering and butchering and torturing people for literally thousands of years. So it's nothing new. And they've been murdering the Koreans, invading them and butchering them for, if not thousands, hundreds of years. So, and then they did the same thing to the Chinese, killing 89,000 civilians in Nanking. Look it up, people. So it's all there. All the information is there. So look at all the stuff that's thrown together here. And here's a guy who wants to be this organic gardener who's got this bizarre right-wing reality supporting a bunch of corrupt criminals who doesn't apparently see. Now, I have no great support of anybody. The problem with the so-called liberals or the Democrats is they talk a good game, but nothing ever happens. The cities that have the most homeless are a lot of these Democratic cities. San Francisco, Los Angeles, these are states that are all Democratic, but they do absolutely nothing to help anybody. So I'm not a big fan of anybody. But the point is they talk a good game. If we would do what was necessary there, we would see some changes. But, guys like him are the people that block it. Now he wants to come out and... So is he a mouthpiece for all of these people? Well, I tend to wonder now. This guy is definitely a person you cannot believe anything that he says. And if he puts on a so-called expert, well, what does that mean? He's chosen that expert so he can milk them, so he can make more money in his own private reality. So I hope everybody's got that. That's the story of that. Find your own stuff. I will leave links down below to Ed Opperman, to interviews with Maurice Terry, and you can see it and get it from the horse's mouth. And I will be also putting links and talking about the person who's taken over from this, which seems to be dead. I'm not sure anybody cares about this case. Apparently, as of recently, true crime is something that is a great interest out there, particularly from middle-aged, apparently affluent women who love true crime stuff. And I don't quite understand why, but these kind of things are fairly frightening. But they have tours of Jeffrey Dahmer's place, and it's all loaded with women who are fascinated by this for whatever it means. So, all of this is part of a bigger picture in general. I keep telling people this in general with everything. Be careful where you're getting information from. Now, I'm an excellent researcher, and I have made a few errors from information that appeared to be correct at the time. But I always correct myself, and we have to be careful. There's nothing that's ever correct. It's what you know at this time. So you talk to somebody, he says he's an expert, and he fills in a blank there. Well, That's the filled in blank for the time being. It not means that's the final word on it. The final word on it may be quite different. That was that person's perspective. And what is his problem? Is he bought off? Anything that goes with it. But the bottom line is a big, big question here. Seek information from the sources, seek information from real experts directly, and don't go through people that are doing this to make money off of it. And that's the only thing that this person is doing. He wants to go back into gardening. Well, I think he should, and he should be involved in something which he appears to be good at, and stay away from things that are hurting people, that deal with life and death and can cause serious problems in people's lives. Get out of this industry. You're not a researcher. Go and do what you do best, whatever that may be. Until next time.